Welcome, my friends of the darkness. I advise you to turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare to feel the chill of the water running not only through the stream, but also down your spine. Today we will enter a forgotten, isolated house, where every damp wall holds a secret. And every foggy window could be an invitation to something that should never return. But remember, once you hear the call of the stream, there is no escaping it. It always finds a way to drag you down to its depths. Story 1: The House on Red Creek. Eduardo was a lonely widower who decided to move into an abandoned house near a stream in the countryside. The building was simple, made of wood, surrounded by tall trees. The silence of the place seemed perfect for escaping the painful memories of his deceased wife. But residents of the nearby village warned him, that house doesn't bring peace, it only calls to what is dead. For the first week, Eduardo noticed that the stream water had a strange hue at dusk, almost reddish. He thought it was a reflection of the sunset, until one day, in the middle of the night, he was awakened by knocking on the walls, as if something was trying to escape from within. When he approached the window, he saw wet footprints leading from the stream's edge to the house's door. The footprints were small, childlike. But no one lived there. The next night, he heard children's laughter coming from the basement. When he went down with a flashlight, he found old, soaked toys scattered across the floor, porcelain dolls with broken eyes and wooden cars. None of them had been there when he moved in. Eduardo decided to leave, but before he did, he glanced out the window. Across the stream, 3 pale children were watching him. Their eyes were completely black. They smiled and pointed at the house, as if to say he would never be able to leave. The next morning, the neighbors found the house locked, and the stream as red as blood. Eduardo was never seen again. Story 2: The Man in the Reflection. 2 siblings, Laura and Marcos, inherited an old cabin built on the banks of a secluded stream. They decided to spend the weekend there, even after hearing rumors that no one could stay there for long. The first night was calm, until Marcos, as he approached the water, noticed something unsettling. His reflection wasn't following him. Instead of repeating his movements, the reflection smiled darkly and waved, inviting him in. Laura thought it was her brother's imagination. But the next night, the two went to the stream's edge together. And this time, they both saw it. In the reflection in the water, there weren't 2 siblings. There were 3 people. Beside them appeared the image of a tall, thin man, his face obscured by a shadow. He moved closer and closer to their reflection, as if trying to break through the surface of the water. Terrified, they ran back into the house. But when they looked through the windows, they realized the reflection hadn't stayed in the stream. The shadowy man now appeared inside, reflected in the glass, watching them. The next morning, neighbors found the cabin empty. In the stream, only the reflection of 2 terrified figures remained, trapped in the water. Story 3: The Woman with the Soaked Window. Carolina inherited her grandmother's old house, built near a dark, silent creek. Since childhood, she remembered hearing stories about her grandmother talking to someone who lived in the water. That first night, Carolina heard footsteps in the backyard. When she woke, she noticed that her bedroom window was covered in wet handprints, as if someone had been watching her. In the following days, the events became more disturbing. Even without rain, water was always running down the walls of the house. The air smelled of mud, and in the early hours of the morning, she would hear a woman's voice whispering her name. An elderly neighbor told her that many years ago, a woman had been found dead in the creek. Some said Carolina's own grandmother helped cover up the crime. Since then, it was believed that her soul haunted the house. Determined to uncover the truth, Carolina stayed up late, watching the window. At 3 in the morning, drops began to drip from the glass, and a woman's face appeared, drenched, pale, with long hair covering her face. The woman's hand pressed against the glass until it cracked. The last thing Carolina saw was the window shattering, and wet arms pulling her out. The next day, the neighbors found the house empty. But in the stream, among the rocks, lay a soaked white dress, identical to the one Carolina had been wearing the night before. Story 4: The Locked Room. Raphael, an architect, bought an old house on the banks of a stream to renovate and transform into a vacation retreat. The building was almost a century old and seemed solid, but there was a bedroom upstairs that was locked. No key worked, and the previous owners had never explained why. The first night, he heard heavy footsteps coming from the upper floor, precisely where the inaccessible room was. One day, intrigued, he forced the door open. The room was intact, but completely damp. The walls were darkly stained, as if the stream water had seeped into the space. In the corner, he found an old bed, still covered in soaked sheets. As he approached, he felt the mattress move, as if something was breathing beneath it. That same night, Raphael woke to the sound of running water inside the house. When he opened his eyes, he realized he was lying on the floor of the locked room, even though he had slept in the living room. And from under the bed, he heard the sound of slow, wet breathing. Terrified, he tried to escape, but the door had closed by itself. Then, a pale, soaked hand reached out from under the bed and grabbed his ankle. Raphael was violently dragged under the mattress. The room fell silent, except for the sound of dripping water. Days later, local residents noticed that the house was empty again. But every evening, an upstairs window would open by itself, and drops of water would run down the glass, as if someone inside was still trying to escape. And so, my friends of the darkness, we have reached the end of another journey along the banks of the stream, where the water carries not only leaves and stones, but also secrets, screams, and entire lives. If you felt the shiver run down your spine, remember, it doesn't disappear when the video ends. The fear remains, lurking, like the sound of water that never stops running. Like, subscribe to the channel, and share these stories with other travelers of the night. But be careful. The next time you hear the sound of a stream, it may not just be water calling to you.